Hi, I'm Cindy.
And I'm Dave.
We're glad you're here.
Thanks for checking out Kotaku Bonsai. Hey, how you guys doing? Hope you're having a great day. Tonight I'm going to do some air layering on these two cherry trees. These are kwanzan cherry trees, and I uprooted them from a lady nearby November of 2023. It's now May of 24, and they have just exploded with growth. There's suckers coming out the bottom. The canopy is just blown out with leaves, and they're doing really, really well. They're huge. They're going to make really, really big bonsai down the road. But of course, they're 6 feet tall, and I have no need for that. So we're going to do some air layering so that I can take the top of this and propagate it on instead of just taking a trunk chop and discarding the top. So if you are not familiar with air layering, there's two main ways to do it. There's the girdle method, where we take a strip of bark in a ring shape around the trunk. There's also the tourniquet method, where you can use heavy gauge wire to go around the trunk and tie it really, really tight as if a tourniquet, which cuts off the water flow up to the top of the tree. Both methods do the same thing. Today, I'm going to be using the girdling method. So I'm going to take a ring of bark around each of the trees tonight. And I have a roll of painter's tape that I'm going to wrap around here to just use as a guideline for where I'm going to make my cuts. I'm going to wrap it twice, two ways. With my painter's tape, I'm going to wrap it around once and then go above it another time, so that I'm going to take about a 3 to 4 inch strip of bark the whole way around this tree and that one behind me. And then I'm going to pack it with some sphagnum moss, and instead of using a plastic bag or plastic material to hold it in, I'm going to actually use just a regular old nursery pot that's big enough to go around this. And in a minute, I'll show you why. Now, just to give you a sense of size here, this is my regular old iPhone up against the trunk there. So even if I put my phone wide, it's just barely larger than the diameter of this tree. So these are two really large specimens. I'm gonna just spin this a sec. So I got some weeds in here to get rid of, but there's a couple suckers coming up from the roots. There's a couple dead roots that are sticking out the top, which we'll clean up as we go. But it's very healthy, very vibrant, and because of that, I think it will take to air layering very nicely. So here you're looking at the base of the tree. We're going to measure and say that the diameter is about 4.5 inches. Between 4.5 and 5. And so what I'm going to do is double that number. So we're going to go about 9.5, 10 inches. And that's where the bottom of my cut is going to be. So that'll go from about 10 inches, say, to 12 inches from the soil level is the ring of bark that we're going to remove. And I'm going to use this painter's tape to go around here just to mark where I'm going to cut. Because sometimes if you start cutting here and you go around the circumference of the tree and you wind up 2 inches below, well, then you've got a problem. But with the painter's tape, it'll at least show me the line of the circle around the circumference of the tree that we're going to remove. So I'm going to tape that up now, and then we'll start cutting. So you can see with the blue tape where I've marked off where we're going to cut. And I use 2 of them because you want to take a fairly thick girdle of bark off the tree. There is some ratios that are online that are recommended, but you need to take a fairly substantial piece of bark because you don't want the bottom and the top to grow callus tissue and rejoin themselves. You need to take enough bark to prevent that from happening so that you'll have a successful air layer. Because these trees, they want to survive. And when they're injured in this way, they will do what they need to do to survive. And if that means growing callus tissue in order to rejoin the 2 parts, the tree will do that. But if we're successful and take enough bark off, we'll get the tree to grow roots for us at this level rather than rejoining itself. So I'm going to go use my sharp knife and go under this one and above that line and remove that whole strip of bark. So now the sun's starting to set behind the house and we're in the shade now, but you want to make sure you remove any green tissue, the cambium that's under the bark, because if you leave any substantial amount of cambium, it will be very likely to fail and you'll just develop callus tissue. So get as much green as you can, get down pretty good to the hardwood, removing any of the, cork-like tissue. And you'll see the difference as you go down through the layers of bark. But definitely you want to concentrate on making sure there's no green tissue or cambium left over. That should ensure that this will be successful. Now what I'm going to do is grab a pot from my shed. I'm going to cut it, and then I'm going to pack it full of moss, sphagnum moss, and seal this up so it retains moisture and allows the top of the tree to have moisture and a medium in which to grow its roots. And so here I've got 2 just generic, garden center pots that you might get mums in or something like that. And I've saved these through the years, and I got a million of them up in the shed. And these are really nice because they're disposable, and we can cut them to the size that we need for this area. So I'm going to take most of the bottom out, but I'm going to leave a bit of a lip so that it kind of hugs the tree. And then I'll take about half of the height of it off. So it basically makes a little plastic cup. And if you're doing air layers here on a tree that's, say, pencil thick or 1 inch thick or somewhere in that neck of the woods, you don't really need to do this because you can just use your hand with a big ball of sphagnum moss, wrap it around, and then use whatever plastic to wrap it around and keep it in place. But it's a lot more unwieldy to do that on a trunk this size. So I like to use these kind of things to just make it a little easier. So I'm going to cut these, put it on the tree, and then pack it with moss. So here's the little plastic pot that I wrapped around the trunk. And right here you can see I used just some packing tape to put it back together. I had to cut this way in order to be able to wrap it around the trunk, but it sits on there really nicely, and I'm going to pack down in here with our sphagnum moss so that the roots can grow into that. It takes a couple extra minutes to do this setup, but I find that it's so much more helpful because you're not, dropping sphagnum moss. It's so much easier to get it packed in there nicely and then wrap it up with plastic of your choice to seal it in so that it holds the moisture. So that's what I'm going to do now, is put our sphagnum moss down in there and then use some plastic wrap to seal it. So now this is packed in here really nicely. It's filled with sphagnum moss. It's pretty, it's packed pretty tightly. And then I use the plastic to cinch it down even tighter. It's very well sealed. I am going to poke a few holes so that moisture can get in and out, because you want some movement of moisture and air. But this is really nice. I'm very happy with how this turned out. And over the next coming weeks and months, the top should start to make roots. And then later on this year, we can take it off. So now I got to do the same thing with the second tree. Well, my friends, here we are. So I've got both of the trees done tonight, air layered, packed full of sphagnum moss in here, wrapped really nicely. It doesn't look too sloppy, which is always nice in your garden. So I'm very happy with how this turned out. The only downside to this method is that because the plastic is colored, you can't readily see the roots developing, which, is helpful. So that is the one downside. However, it makes it very easy to pack a really nice pack of moss on the trees, especially when you're dealing with such large material. So it's a bit of a trade-off. I like it. I think it's helpful. We're going to let it go probably till the end of the year, or at least the end of the season when the leaves drop, and then probably take it off at that point. You might get tempted to take a peek or unwrap it, in a couple of months and see if there's roots going. I think At this point in my life, I can be patient enough that I'm just going to let it go, hope for the best, observe the tree for signs of change, back budding, new growth, that kind of stuff. Or, you know, if the top starts to die off, that's another thing. So I'll be just observing my trees like I do every day and see what happens. But I'm very happy with this. I hope you guys learned something new today. Maybe you can take this approach and use it for your own. And see you in the next one. So I hope you got something today that you can use on your own, in your own trees, and something that's helpful to you too. Thanks. See you in the next one.